So this is the best way yet to control your fireplace with your Echo. I know I've said that before, but for real. This time we have a real three-way switch. Wall switch works. Alexa, turn on living room fireplace.
Okay.
Echo works, and the wall switch works, no matter what position either is in. Here's how to do it. So here's the supplies we'll need to do this. At the heart of it, we have the Sonoff SV. This is what we will put some open source firmware in there called Tasmota, which will allow us to control the fireplace with Alexa. Need a couple random accessories. You'll need a power supply for it. This is an old adapter I had left over from something. Anything between 5 and 24 volts will work on this Sonoff SV. So just check your label. This one is actually 5 volts. Cut the end off and we can solder it on there. If you don't have an old one laying around, you can certainly buy a regular USB adapter and a regular USB cord. Cut the end off and solder the wires on there. You also need some random lengths of wires. 6 to 12 inches should be fine, I think. You'll need some spade connectors. At least my fireplace uses spade connectors. Check your fireplace to see what it needs, but you'll need a few of these. And to make things easier, we'll need one of these little female jumper wires. Again, not absolutely required, but it makes it easier when you're putting their jumpers on here. You can just solder directly to these, but that's a little cumbersome sometimes. We'll also need some of these header pins that we'll solder onto the board that will make our lives a little easier, as well as some of these jumper wires to go on these header pins that we're going to solder on. Optional, but very handy. The one other thing we'll need is a programmer. So you only need it once, and that's how we load the actual software onto the Sonoff SV. This converts the USB signal to a serial signal. This is a specific programmer. I'll link to this in the description. Not this specific one. I found a better one. I'm not too fond of this one. But in my example, we're actually going to use my old Arduino. And all it does is convert the USB to the serial. You put a couple wires in here, connect it to the Sonoff, and we're good to go. You can also do the same thing if you have a Raspberry Pi laying around. You can do a similar thing. So first, let's solder some of these little headers that'll make it easier to connect our jumper wires to the board. Again, this step is optional, but does make it easier if you're going to flash this for other reasons, if you do it multiple times. You're going to solder these pins onto these 4 on the left, which are 3.3 volts, RX, TX, and ground. So now we're going to do the one-time connection to get the software onto the Sonoff from our Arduino. Take a jumper wire and put it between the reset pin and ground. And what that does is bypasses the chip and it'll directly talk out of the serial pins over here. And the goal is to use all 4 of these. We're going to hook up all 4 of these pins over here on the Sonoff. We'll need our power, which in this case is 3.3 volts. We'll need our RX, which is receive. We'll need our TX, which is transmit. And we'll need our ground. That's what these wires are for. So first, we'll do 3.3 volts. So coming out of the Arduino right here, you'll see it labeled 3.3. Do not hook 5 volts up to the Sonoff. It'll burn it up. 3.3 volts. Next, we'll do I got all 3 here. We'll do black is ground. Now, the grounds go together, so the ground from the Sonoff to the ground on the Arduino. And then your TX and RX are flip-flopped. So the TX coming from the Sonoff, which in my case is gray, is going to RX on the Arduino, and the other way around. The RX from the Sonoff is going to TX on the Arduino. Now, just in case this doesn't work, I have seen cases where I'm not sure exactly why, but these are flip-flopped. So in that case, you'll do TX to TX and RX to RX. So if it doesn't work this way, just flip those two around and try again. Now to the software side of things, head over to the ESP Easy Flasher website in the description. Download the zip file, and then go ahead and extract that zip file to a directory. Now go over to the Tasmota website, link in the description, and download version 6.1.641 is the one I'm using, but you use whatever is out at the time that you do this. Get the sonoff.bin file, just the plain old sonoff.bin. Download that. Once you download that, go ahead and move that sonoff.bin file to the same directory as your ESP Easy tool, and that'll make things easier later on. Now we have to put the hardware in the Sonoff in flashing mode. To do that, hold down this little button on there while you plug in power to the Arduino. And after your Arduino gets power, hold this button for about 2 seconds and then let go. You won't see anything, but that puts it in flashing mode. Now we're ready to flash. So double click on your Flash ESP8266 tool, put it in COM6, which you can find in Device Manager. It's COM6 for me, it might be something different from you. And grab your sonoff.bin file and hit flash. You'll see the little dots start at the bottom and knows you're flashing. It'll take a couple minutes. And when it's done successfully, it'll say flash complete. We need one more piece of software for our initial setup. It's called Termite. So go to this website, download Termite, unzip it, and execute it. Now there's a couple settings. Pick your COM port that you used earlier, in my case it's COM6, and set the baud rate to 115/200. Do that, hit OK, and you should see something similar to this. You can type status 7 on the line and make sure it responds, and it tells you the status of the device. This is where we're going to do our initial Wi-Fi setup. So type in SSID1 and give it the name of your Wi-Fi network. And then type in password 1 and then the password to your Wi-Fi network. It should respond with the IP address of your network. You may have to power it off and on here if it doesn't, but it comes back with that IP address. Put that IP address in your browser and it should bring up that web page. So now we're going to do some additional configuration. So click on configuration, click on configure module. Now here choose Sonoff SV because that's the kind of device we're using, and then hit save. And the device will restart. Once it comes back, click on configuration again. Configure module. Now go down and choose GPIO 14 sensor. switch 109. That's what we're going to do. That's what will be the wall switch. We'll connect to GPIO 14. Same thing, hit save, device will restart. Don't do these two steps together. I've had a problem where it didn't save my settings. So set that first option, let it restart, and then come back and set that second option. And let's just make sure our settings are there. Configure module. And yes, Sonoff SV and switch 109. We also need to configure a couple other things, so click on Configure Other. This is where we give it a friendly name instead of Sonoff. So if you have multiple of these, it's easy to tell them apart. We'll call it Upstairs Fireplace. And then down here on Emulation, we're going to call it, we're going to tell it to emulate a Belkin Wemo, and this will allow Alexa to find the device. Click Save, it'll restart. After it restarts, click on Information, and just verify your emulation is set to Belkin Wemo. So there's a couple other options that we can set to make this Sonoff Fireplace really powerful. First thing I want to show you is the console. So instead of using Termite, now that we have our web interface, we can use console, and we can enter all our commands in here. So the first thing I want to do is set a safety feature, and the command is called pulse time. What pulse time does is it allows your Sonoff to turn off your fireplace at a given amount of time after it's been turned on. So in my case, I want to set it to 2 hours. So if anybody turns the fireplace on, either from Alexa or from the wall switch, it will allow it to turn itself off after 2 hours in case we forget about it. To set that command, you enter pulse time, and then it's basically the number of seconds. Sorry, 7,300. 7,300 seconds in 2 hours. That's not exactly right, and over here on the commands, it tells you exactly what's going on here. So anything between 1 and 111 is a pulse time set in tenths of a second. So if you set it to 10, that will actually stay on for 1 second. Anything 112 and above actually then converts to seconds. So there's 3,600 seconds in 1 hour. We want it for 2 hours at 7,200 plus this 100 for this other, add 100 to it. Anyways, it comes up with 7,300 for 7,300 for 2 hours. So we just hit enter, and now it's set. You can test this out by pushing the button on your Sonoff, which will turn your switch on. I just pushed it, and you can see in the commands here it says somebody pushed the power on button, and then type pulse time, and it will tell you your timer is set for 7,300 and there's 7,288 left, and that's your countdown. And every time you enter this command, it gets lower and lower. When it gets down to 0, it'll turn itself off. So just a handy feature that you might want to do for safety reasons. So there's one more bit of hardware hacking that we need to do so that this board will work on a fireplace. We need to turn this relay into what's called a dry contact relay. So the way it's set up right now, when you apply your 5 volts to this, it'll send the 5 volts back out to the fireplace, and that's not good. All we want it to do is close the relay. We don't want it to forward on that 5 volts. So to do that, all we have to do is remove these tiny 2 little 0 volt resistors, 0 ohm resistors, right here and right here. I find the best way is just take a little screwdriver and pry them off, but you can also use a soldering iron if you want to heat them up, and that's sometimes better, but we'll try it with the screwdriver. And pry against those headers, and boom, that came out real easy. Let's do this other side. There we go. Now it's time to do our wiring connections on the board. So ahead of time, I went ahead and prepared this little bit of wire. This is what connects our wall switch to the board. So you can take one of your female jumper wires, cut it in half, and just splice it in to a length of wire, and the other end will have your female connectors. At least on my fireplace it is. So check your connectors. These will simply connect to our GPIO 14, and then these will connect to the wires that go to the wall switch. Second thing we need is this small little bit of wire. You'll want 2 female spades on here, and then we'll just directly solder the ends of this into the out pins over here. And that's what will connect into the fireplace control module. We'll need a tiny little jumper that I just made out of some wire. And that will go on our pins here labeled N plus and N minus. And we'll solder that on there. And then finally, we'll have the power supply. So I cut the end off the power supply for my 5-volt power supply I had laying around. And that will go on this pin, the 5 to 24 volt plus and minus. And we'll simply unsolder these 2 header pins to solder this one on. So let's do it. Power it up and make sure our power supply is good. Yep. And now we can hear our relay click off and on. So then you can take your one that's going to go to the wall switch and put these on, it's the one labeled S and G, and it says IO14. So it's this bottom row and the 2 outside pins. And then you can test that by simulating a wall switch. Hear that click and see the red light goes off. So that's working. And now we can put, so unplug it. And now we can solder the female side of it over here on the out. The polarity does not matter in this case. And now we're ready to hook it up. Leave your Sonoff device powered on and plugged in for about 20 or 30 minutes before you try to discover it with Alexa. So now we're going to open our Alexa app and see if we can discover our device. Click on Devices, Plugs. Alexa, search for devices.
Starting discovery. This will take up to 20 seconds. If you haven't already, Please enable the smart home skill for your smart device from the Alexa app.
And there it is. It just showed up. Upstairs fireplace. So now that this is complete, it's time to install it under the fireplace. First thing you need to do is find something to isolate it from the metal bottom of the fireplace. I'm going to use this little plastic tray. I'm in the process of designing a laser cut case for this, and I'll put those plans in the description when I'm finished. Simply place that in there. So find where your wall switch wires meet up to your fireplace console. For me, it's right here with these connectors. So I know this goes to the wall switch. So simply unplug that. And then take the side of this that you connected with the two female headers on your GPIO 14 and connect that to the wall switch. And then the other side on the out plus and out minus, go into these, which leads into the control module of the fireplace. Okay, once you get all that done, you can tuck that under. And plug in your fireplace. I'm sorry, plug in your adapter. All right, let's see if it works. Alexa, turn on upstairs fireplace.
Okay.
There we go, success. All right, success, we did it. So just remember, your switch on the wall now controls the fireplace just like Alexa does. So you can turn it off from Alexa and turn it on from here, turn it off from here, and turn it on from Alexa. So no matter what position that is on the wall, hush Alexa. So no matter what position this is on the wall, Alexa will still know what state your fireplace is. Good luck, and please consider subscribing.